Yo, what is up, music makers? This is Bastion coming in. Just wanted to do a tutorial production video about my Ableton template. Big homie Nyrus was asking for tips, and so I figured if he wanted some template tips, I figured there might be more people out there as well. So anyway, this is what my template looks like when I open up Ableton. It might look like a lot or not. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure how other people do their templates. I know some people start with completely blank slates, and that's cool too. But I find that it really helps me to have the tools that I like to use the most right there, ready to go. It allows you to skip the setting up and the technical side of things and get right to the creative, and just save myself time later on in the mix. So let's jump in. My template is divided up into two main buses or groups. My drum bus, which contains my percussion section, storm drum, which is a sample library, and then my drum subgroup, which will have my kick and maybe some drum loops. Just like a quick note up front, a lot of this stuff is subject to change over the course of the song and the mix. It really all just depends on the needs of the song. Okay, so jumping over to the other group, I just call it the sidechain bus. These are all the elements that will get sidechained to the kick and maybe snare. Everything is in here, from effects to sample libraries and synth group, bass group. And then outside of these two groups, you can see I've got my trigger snare and trigger kick basically for my sidechain setup. And I'll briefly touch on it in a minute. But besides that, I've got one track up here for reference, meaning I would just drag in a track that I'm really inspired by or that has something that I want to kind of emulate. And I've got my folder down here full of tracks that I might want to reference at some point. Reference tracks are great. That could be a whole other video. Anyway, so I've got that there. I've got my two main groups, and I've got this external audio track if I wanted to record my voice. And this could also just be like an extra audio track. With sidechaining, I use Volume Shaper, great plugin. You know, I'll probably do a separate video for how to use this thing. There's honestly not many great tutorials out there for how to use this properly. I'm going to do a different tutorial on this, but basically, and then once you have, I'll do a separate video. The basic idea is I'm sending this MIDI information to this plugin, and it's just ducking the volume. Very clean sidechaining. The reason Volume Shaper is so great and better than, you know, just sidechaining with an Ableton compressor is that you've got this. You can make frequency bands of where you want to compress. And as you can see, for the kick, I only sidechain the low end. I don't need it to cut through all my leads and stuff like that, because my music is fairly melodic, and I don't want, you know, this completely pulsing sound. And in the snare, I'm not ducking like the super highs. I want my hats and stuff to come through, and I don't need it to duck the sub. I'm not making like hard dubstep where like the snare is like tonk tonk, like cutting through everything and is like the loudest thing in the mix usually. But yeah, highly recommend, and I'll do a separate video on that. Within my drum bus, you can see I love my groups, I love my subgroups, and over the course of making a song, I will make like a lot more subgroups. You can see I've got all of my main section groups already lowered by a certain level. I will probably end up having to turn this down a little bit more, but this is where I like to keep my levels at starting out. I don't know, I see some awesome artists will just start everything like at 0. You know, their mixes will be loud as fuck, and that's cool, but I know that I'm going to need to turn things down, and some things less than others, right? So within percussion, I like to have a separate subgroup for hats and shakers. I just find that those high frequencies are like pretty aggressive, and oftentimes samples are mixed so loud these days that these need to be turned down, you know, a little extra compared to the rest of my percussion. So I like to have that already pre-set up. And you can see I've already got like a bunch of tracks. Definitely create a default you know, audio track in Midi Track. Just right click and go down to save as default audio track. And then whenever I make a new audio track, Command T. Yeah, this is what my default audio track looks like. Basically a utility in the front and the back. Utilities are super useful, especially for gain automation. You know, conventional wisdom is that you don't want to do gain automation on the mixer because it's just annoying and it's hard to make global changes on the track after you do that. Instead, it's much better to automate within the utility plugin, because then you can adjust the overall volume of the track with the mixer. And what else have I got on here? I've got a Transient Shaper first. I love this plugin, Smack Attack by Waves. I'm not like a huge waves guy in general, but this has just been my go-to transient shaper for a few years now. It's great to have a transient shaper. Make your percussion more punchy or anything more punchy, or soften it. It can act as sort of a gate or a compressor as well, which is sweet, or an expander to increase the sustain. So really helpful. And there's a cool waveform that pops up when things play. So I have that on pretty much every audio track, but it's off by default. So EQ8 with a very gentle high pass. For most things, I'm going to want to cut out sub frequencies so they don't conflict with the sub and the bass. So I've already got that set up. I used to have this turned on automatically, as I used to low pass way too much, and my mixes were pretty dull because of it. My ears are sensitive to 10K and above. I don't know if it's just me, but I know that in general, those are pretty harsh frequencies. So I do like to roll them off in some cases, but in general, I've been trying to keep my mixes a little bit more crisp. Glue compressor. I prefer it to the regular compressor. Why? I don't know. It's just what I've always kind of used. Regular compressor, I think is better for side chaining, definitely. But glue compressor, I just kind of like the look of it and the sound. It's off by default, but if I want to use it, I've got it set up so that it's adding 4 dB of makeup. Because often when I use compression, I want to just sort of crush the dynamics a little bit. Slow attack so that I don't completely lose the transient of whatever I'm compressing. Fast release. I would tailor it to whatever sound I'm using. Saturator, off by default, but ready to go at 2 dB if I just want to add a nice little bit of saturation. It's at 85%. And then utility plugin at the end of the chain. So I've got one at the beginning in case I want to do something like mono the sound or bass mono the sound or mess with the input. And then I've got one at the end for automation, again, like making sure that my bass is in mono. If I'm going to mono it here, I'm definitely going to mono it here too, just in case the plugins I'm using are adding stereo or whatever. Might as well show you my default MIDI track too, Command-Shift-T. I've selected Simpler as my default plugin. Easy to change this to Sampler if I want to. Honestly, I don't use Simpler and Sampler as much as I should. I think I maybe set this up because one, it's not a very CPU intensive and it's very useful. I just don't use it as much as I should. Again, utility, and then it looks pretty much the same. Smack Attack, EQ8, Saturator, Glue Compressor. And I don't know why the order is slightly different on this, but that's just, again, that's sort of a case-by-case basis thing. Do you want to saturate the sound before you compress it? Do you want to saturate it after? I like to put my EQ before these things because I don't want to compress and saturate a sound that has resonant peaks and stuff that I'm going to want to cut out. So I typically like to EQ before. When I'm actually mixing, guys, like I don't use EQ8. I'll use that for sort of broad changes, or if there's like a section that I clearly just want to cut. But then I'll go in here and I'll add a Pro Q3, which is, I fucking love. I love this plugin. This is just an amazing EQ. Oh, and you might have just been like, wait, what the hell was that? When I just double right clicked and pulled up this little extra menu. This is an amazing, amazing add-on. It's free software. You 100% should download and install if you love Ableton. It basically adds a whole host of things that just make Ableton better. For example, duplicate, Command B, automatically duplicates 8 times. If I just want to replace all of this with just these two, it's super easy. I just go like this, Command-Shift-D, boom. Boom, boom, boom. And that works on like the MIDI level too. The other thing that's super helpful that it adds is this little sort of menu thing that you can program yourself and choose what is on it. So it's basically just a quick version of using the browser. It's just another way of like having your favorites collection basically, except it's nice to just be able to, double click and have it right there. So I've got like, my Ableton instruments here and then my effects. You can have like these little groups. You can have groups and groups within this menu. I try to keep it simple though and stick to the ones that I use the most. I would consider that part of my template. I'll include like a link below. Let's look at my sends, I guess. So, the default is having like a reverb and a delay that is true of my template as well. Reverb, Valhalla, vintage verb. It's great. It's not that expensive. It's worth it. And then my delay. Yeah, I've just got an echo, pretty long delay. So reverb, delay, and then this third one is actually one knob saturator. I got this from a tutorial like years ago. It's just been part of my workflow ever since in my template. Like it's already on like -14 or so on everything because I love the sound of it. It's just a very, very soft saturation with one knob at my default setting. It's not aggressive. It's pretty soft. It's a pretty soft saturation. So basically, like, I set it there because if I want to crank this all the way, then I start to get distortion on there, but I mostly keep it there to begin with. So that's also partly why I've got all my levels turned down right away, because I'm already adding gain with this one knob. So that's just like to help me like not have to think about mixing when I start working on a song. It already sounds a little beefier, a little crisper right out of the plugin. So yeah, when I first load my template, you can see like the default armed to record MIDI track is my my keys. I use Contact. I only have one piano basically besides whatever's an Omnisphere. It's this one. I just like the sound. Even though I don't have keys like in a lot of my songs, if I get like a song idea, I can just, immediately start writing, and I'll probably delete it by the end of the mix down. My template used to be like even bigger. If this already looks big to you, like you should have seen it before. I would have like multiple instances of all of these. I honestly don't know how my computer handled it. Opening like CPU percentage was like 5-6%, and like that's no good. It takes too long to like open up your template. So you want to keep it as refined as you possibly can while it's still being helpful. So I pretty much always use the instruments from these sample libraries in all my music. So I'm going to have this in my template, but I'm only going to have one instance, and I can duplicate it from there. All of these tracks, they have the EQ on because if I'm going to use them, I'm definitely going to use the EQ, but none of these other plugins are turned on. It's all about conserving CPU where you can. Oh, and I skipped over this before, but I've got these plugins right here. Total, life hack for any producers who don't know music theory, or basically lets you not need music theory at all. When you turn them on, it will keep all of the keys in scale you select. So if I want to play in F, so whatever I play, it's going to nudge the note. That means that there will be repeating keys, but it just lets you sort of go up to the piano and just like bang out these crazy chords, and like you sound like a maestro. If you plan on like learning music theory at some point, it can hold you back a little bit. I never had to pay attention to like what notes I was playing while I'm using these plugins. Like the first few years I was writing music. Now I'm like trying to use them less, but super helpful. There's all sorts of modes. You can actually learn some cool scales that a lot of people probably are not using or not onto. Anyway, I guess I'll quickly cover like subgroups as far as processing. Again, look, everything's turned off. I'm not trying to, use a bunch of CPU right out of the gate. I do have a limiter on my main bus, and these will probably be turned off or replaced with proper mastering limiters by the end of the mixdown, but just starting out, got the limiter on there so I don't kill my ears by accident. On the subgroups, it looks kind of similar to what I've got on my tracks. I mean, another limiter, when you're gain staging and when you're mixing as you go, it can be very helpful to limit within, each group. It takes a lot of pressure off of the limiters later on. It's going to sound a lot louder overall. That's what Skrillex does basically, and Ahi has a great video of how he works that. I've also got this. Good old OTT. Except it might look a little bit different to you because this is a 4-band OTT. And I got this from a puppet guy. What the frick is his name? I don't remember. But you know the guy I'm talking about, the puppet guy. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now. His tutorials are great. He's got a template for this. You can just download it or recreate it. It's very easy. Let's talk about bass real quick. Sometimes the bass will become its own third bus. Reason being, I might want to sidechain it differently from everything else to the kick. Not always, but sometimes. I really should have like a subgroup within here for like the top basses, and then my sub would be separate. Operator is my default sub. I highly recommend the recent Mr. Bill tutorial, how to make insane subs. Better on bass mono. I might end up just doing mono in the mix. It depends. EQ, light saturation on soft sine. Limiter at 4 dB. I got this from like deadmau5, his masterclass. Basically, he wants to make sure that the sub is the same level no matter what note he plays. If you've got like a cool bass line or something, you don't want like the top parts of the bass to be like quieter than the bottom parts or vice versa, which can happen. Basically, this will crank the gain not so much that it completely distorts, but enough so that no matter what note I hit, I can see that it's doing some reduction, which means that it's at zero, which digital 0, so it's the same level no matter what. And then I've got another bass mono at the end. So anyway, that's my sub. Well, Sorry if this was a little, all over the place. It's actually like first time I'm doing one of these kind of videos, but hope to do more of them. I've definitely learned a lot of tricks over the last 4 years making music in Ableton, and I teach private lessons over Zoom. Feel free to reach out to me if you're interested. Yeah, and I hope this was helpful. I don't think I'm really forgetting anything. Just have a lot of audio tracks for sure, but without too many plugins on there to take, that are taking up CPU. And just base this around your workflow. This is all based around my workflow. My workflow might not be the same as yours. Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer. This is just how I do things. And hope that you guys find your best template that works for you. Good luck out there. Till next time, Bastion out.